There we go.
There you go. Give it 30 seconds. And welcome to Three Geeks and a Microphone podcast. I'm Dean.
I'm Art.
I'm Russ.
And today we are doing a free-form open discussion on vintage handheld games. Everything from the old like Tomy electronic games to the water pick games to Game Boys. Guys, who here had some of this stuff when they were a kid? Me personally, like the early, like the Tron game, like you're showing there, or Art, I never had any of those. Like the old electronic footballs, I never had any of those. What about you guys?
I had at one point I had the football game and I had a couple other ones. My favorite was the Tron handheld.
Nice.
And this one still works. These came out in I think 1982, 83 era. I don't know how well it shows up, but it was based on the movie, and this game for me was probably one of my favorites. I had relatives that had Simon and some of the other ones, and Simon actually was one of my favorites too. But this one, you know, when I wanted to pretend I was playing Star Trek or Star Wars, this was my computer console, my Spock's computer console. This one did all. I mean, this thing was like my everything as a kid.
Nice.
I took it everywhere. I can't tell you how many times my dad had to go to like Radio Shack for the power bricks for him, the universal power brick, and and then C-cell batteries.
I was gonna say, did it plug in or was it battery operated?
Yeah, it's actually got a 2.1 millimeter jack on the side, and I've actually got it. I had it plugged in to a wall wart, a universal wall wart, an actual old school Radio Shack one. And like I said, this still works.
Nice.
I don't know if camera will pick it up. I tested this earlier and it worked okay, but it wasn't great. I had to sit and play with it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can see it. That's cool.
But this actually has like 3 Tron games in it, which was pretty advanced for the time. It had the light cycle game, and then it had the disc game, and then you go up against, once you defeat all of the little Sark characters, you actually do fight against the MCP. You've got to throw the disc into the MCP just like in the film.
Okay. As far as I never had like I remember seeing commercials for like the old who put it out? Radio Shack, the 2-player football.
I think Radio Shack sold them, but I don't think they. Maybe they did, but I don't think they put them out. I thought Tomy did. It was either Tomy or I can't think of the other company. So anyway, sorry.
I had no, that's cool. I had friends that had them, but my first true handheld was a Game Boy. Years later, I never had any of the what you're saying, like the electronic. Now, if you want to go back further, I had like the water jet type games where you throw the rings up and stuff like that. Those I had, but I never had anything like what you're talking about.
Yeah. Now later on, I did have the old DMG Game Boy, and then I bought like a Game Boy Color, and then even later still, I bought the Game Boy Advanced once I was in the Navy. I took the Game Boys underway with me, but yeah, I mean these older ones though, I think they're awesome. They're definitely worth collecting. If you can find original ones. I mean, there's recently in the last couple of years they've been re-releasing them or reselling them, or reproductions.
Okay, like new ones.
Yeah.
They're like the same ones, but with a slightly new, updated look, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I've seen some of those at like the local high school pharmacy stores and everything. I haven't really bought any, but and I've kind of like Dean. I never had any of those type of thing as a kid. I had one of the water fills, whatever you call them,
Right.
which it'd been around since before I was born. So it was my older siblings. It was fun until it broke, you know. But
I remember seeing, truth be told, a couple years ago for Christmas, I got my son a vintage Game Boy, the original Game Boy with a bunch of cartridges for it. But I remember when I got him the uh, what is it? The Atari flashbacks. I have a couple of those. I have a vintage Atari, but I got him some of the Atari flashbacks, and I got him one of the small. They look like a cabinet unit that have some of the cabinet games built into the small
okay.
handheld. But what you're saying, Art, I never had as a kid. I had friends who did, but I never had anything quite like that. I mean, did you ever did you took it to school with you?
No, actually, that's the one thing I didn't do with it. But I know, like, when we went to trips to like Chicago to see like my great grandparents, things like that. I mean, we went to Florida to see my mom's parents. This thing went everywhere with us. And in fact, at one point, my dad even bought one of those cigarette lighter adapters so I could play it in the car
Oh wow.
or in the vans. But it got annoying because these older ones, they didn't have volume control on them.
As I said,
Oh,
they didn't even have headphone jacks, right?
No, this doesn't have a headphone jack. I mean, and really, what more do you really need as far as playing video games? I mean, this was from a really simpler time, and these things were great. I mean, they were purpose driven. They were to play one game and one game only, and they did it well.
Mhm. Sure, and the the ROM chips and everything are built right into it, so it's not like you have to swap anything out.
No, yeah,
But I
you don't
get
have to swap cartridges out. You don't have to worry about losing cartridges. But then again, you're still, if you buy one of these, you're only going to play that one game.
right. I guess that's its limitation. You can only play whatever's hard coded into it.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, it's everything that was an advantage with them was also a disadvantage.
Right. So I don't know. I mean, like I said, I had friends that had them. Like I was looking, we were talking before we started, like the vintage Merlin from 1978. My buddy had one, and he actually beat the damn thing. He was good enough with it that he was able to solve all the puzzles on it. Now, I remember seeing commercials for it in the early 80s, and I definitely remember seeing commercials for the handhelds. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I didn't come into it until I got my Game Boy. I was never big into the handhelds myself. I like
I'm
consoles better, but
yeah, I'm the same with Dean. Outside of something like Simon, that
oh yeah,
we had one as a kid, and I just found this one at the Goodwill, which I do like Simon. But one thing I happen to be laughing at because I bought a bag of toys, uh, the handheld games. It got to the point where the technology became so easy that they were McDonald's Happy Meal toys, even that these are little, and they're not bad. I've actually been stuck in a car waiting for my niece or someone, and when they were kids, and
mhm.
one of those were from a Happy Meal, and waste about 15-20 minutes. They're not complicated, not the ones from McDonald's, but that's about the experience I have with handhelds outside of a Game Boy.
See, I never realized that McDonald's did handhelds like that. Huh.
Yeah, I
So
totally missed out on that myself.
so are you looking to collect more of these, Art? What ones are you looking for?
Eventually, Simon actually is one of them. I'll probably go back and get like original like early 80s Simon or the like the late 70s foot or early 80s football games. Uh I've tried some of the newer ones, and even as a kid I was kind of into modding like my Game Boy.
Right.
Yeah, any way I could find to do it. We used to go to electronic shows. We'd have them here at the Coliseum, and before Game Genie was available, they had adapters that would do pretty much the same thing. That were uh and I don't remember if they even had a brand. They were like, I think somebody hand soldered these things together. Uh and I wish I
Wow.
still had one, but it was like a game adapter that you could modify the game, and they sold kits to like modify your like NES console. They sold kits to modify the screen so you could backlight the screen on the original Game Boy so you could play it in the dark. Uh but yeah, I wish I still had mine. I mean, I have I've ever since the Raspberry Pis have been available, I've been modding like DMGs. This one I didn't mod. This one I ordered from a company called Experimental Pi. It's the 8 gig Raspberry Pi 4B. It's got 8 gigs of RAM. I put a 1 terabyte micro SD card in it. It's got a I can't think of what brand it is because it was like a 200 and some odd dollar card. It's a SanDisk Extreme 1 terabyte, and I've got it loaded with a pre-build load from a guy calls himself Wolfenos. But this has like everything on it, all the way up to PS1 or the original PlayStation.
Oh wow.
And I mean, it plays pretty well, but it's kind of complicated. Yes, it's got a headphone jack. Yes, you can plug it into your TV and plug in controllers to it and different things, but it doesn't really have the simplicity of the original old school game systems.
Mm-hmm. I mean, before you just would drop in the case of the Game Boy, you just drop in a cartridge and flick it on, and you're next thing you know, you're playing Tetris.
Right. But again, the drawback to that is you've got to buy a cartridge, try not to lose the cartridge, or in my case, like I had a dog that ate like 3 of them
Oh,
or chewed them up. And you have to have 20, 30, $60 depending on the game to go buy a game for it, plus keep batteries on hand. Those things ate up double A's.
oh yeah.
Same with even this console, the Tron one, it ate up C-cell batteries left, right, and center. I mean, you get like an hour, 2 hours of playtime out of it, and your batteries are shot.
Wow. I know. I mean, like I said, I had friends that had them. I never did. I'm trying to remember. I remember in elementary school, a kid had brought one of his handhelds. I think it was the football one into class, and I think he put like a shirt or something over it. And he's sitting at the table with a shirt over it, trying to play and trying to keep the sound down so the teacher wouldn't. It didn't work. The teacher caught him and it snagged it. But yeah, I didn't really start getting, like I said, I had an original Game Boy and I think a Game Boy Color, and then from there I kind of gave up on the handhelds. Although, what was the one that was made by Sega?
Game Gear.
Yep. I almost bought a Game Gear because the company out here, they do Palladium games. I'm sorry, it was the N Gear. The Palladium Games out here, they're a role-playing game company. They had a deal, I guess, with Engage to do a video game based off one of their RPG properties called Rifts. And I don't know whatever happened to it. So I was tempted to buy one just in case that game came out, but it never did. Now I do remember that I almost bought a Jaguar back in the day when Atari was rebirthed and they had a handheld. It was actually quite a little powerful machine. I mean, it was what, 16-bit, I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
Because the only game I really remember for it was there was an Aliens game, like an Alien 3 or something game based on it. It was kind of like a third-person scrolling shooter. It was the only game I could remember for the Jaguar.
In between the Tomy games in the 80s or the early 80s was also the Game and Watch, and Nintendo had a lot of those. They had like a Mario Brothers, Donkey Kong, and a few others.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, they actually had a clock built into it. In fact, I got to think of the name of the company. I think it was 8-Bit Dio. Actually re-released the Super Mario Brothers version, but instead of it having like the old like chrome kind of LCD screen, it actually has a full color screen in it, and it'll actually play the original Mario Brothers game,
Oh, wow.
the LCD version. But the thing about those things too is they also have a clock built into it. So when you weren't playing a video game, it was essentially a clock, and it was about the size of your cell phone, of a cell phone.
Okay. I don't
But
remember.
they had the D-pad on them and a couple of buttons, and then the buttons you needed to set the clock.
I don't ever remember seeing those. Now, forgive my ignorance here. Do they still make Game Boys? I know they have the Switch, which is like portable, but do they?
No, I don't think they do. I haven't seen any in stores for a long time. I think the Game Boy, well, no, I think they do. Because they were making like beyond the Game Boy Advance, they made like the Game Boy SP, and then there was a few others after that, and I can't think. The DS and then the DS Lite.
Mhm.
I think there might be one. Maybe there isn't anymore. I'm not sure. I'll have to look into that.
Because I can't even think of, because everyone now is all mobile games. Everyone plays games on their phone, but do they, I'm other trying to think, are they even developing handhelds anymore? Other than the Raspberry Pi community?
I I'm actually not sure, and that because I've been so wrapped up in Raspberry Pis for so long. I mean, since like 2014, something like that.
Mhm.
I really haven't looked. Uh, I last one I bought, I think, was the DS. And that was because one of my cousins and I were playing a game together, and I ended up buying a couple of DSs, one for each of my kids.
Hmm.
But my oldest is going to be 20 before too long. I haven't bought any game systems for them forever. And again, part of that too is because I was modding older systems with Raspberry Pis. Uh, and the thing you'd mentioned about, or that you were talking about Game Boys, is like Game Boy ended up the original Game Boy. There was like 1,800 titles available for it.
Mhm. Oh yeah.
By the time they ended that system, there was like 1,800 games for it. And who had the kind of money that it would have taken to buy every single game? There was really no good way to get them, even in the aftermarket market, like the resale market, buying them used, was it would have been ridiculous and next to impossible to get every single one of them. And there were still games too that weren't even released here.
Right. I was just about to say, and you're just talking US release games. You're not
Right.
talking like stuff that was like only released in Japan.
Right.
My ex brother-in-law is a game head. He's big on classic Nintendo and whatnot. So I know he was working on trying to build a library of actual cartridges, but I just don't know how far he got on that.
Yeah, I actually was trying to do that for my kids, and it kind of got to the point. That's actually kind of how I evolved, or kind of went from old school games and restoring them to just saying basically fuck it. It's cheaper to go buy a $35 Raspberry Pi card and spend another 20 or so on a good size SD card, and then load everything on there, and it's still portable.
Right.
In fact, I did that with a number of old DMG Game Boys uh early on, and I think I posted pictures on my Facebook page of how I was modding them and what parts I was using uh with the Game Boys, and the intent was, here, handing them to my kids. This is way easier than trying to chase down games that are 30 years old.
Right. So I mean, I know we're not talking consoles. That's just for a different discussion. But I wonder, like, for Christmas several years ago, my ex got me a vintage Atari, and I found that there's a concept called bit rot, where some of the old cartridges, for whatever reason, they stop working and whatnot. So I wonder if we're going to start seeing that with like Game Boy carts, because they're starting to get up there in age.
Well, it's possible that the materials will probably start deteriorating or oxidizing eventually. I could totally see that happening, like the contacts and things. Or if the game gets flexed enough, the contacts on the boards coming loose. In fact, funny that you mentioned that about the Atari, because a couple years ago I restored a 2600. Now I didn't do a pie on it. I actually just did the board level repairs to it, replaced the capacitors and burn out resistors,
Mhm.
and replaced the power supply, and then cleaned it up.
Okay.
And then I in fact, there's pictures of that also on my Facebook page. Uh, and instead of trying, the cartridges I had also didn't work. So what I did with that was I found what's called an Uno cart. We'll go more into this when we get into consoles.
Mhm.
But I found an Uno cart, which wasn't terribly expensive, but you can put an SD card in it and preload all of the Atari games that were ever made. And that was actually kind of a beautiful kind of solution to that, because you're not pulling cartridges in and out all the time and running the risk of breaking the contacts in the board
Right.
or breaking the plastic down any farther. And that was something else I ran into, was that plastic starting to deteriorate. It actually, like, in a couple places I had to patch it up. You can't tell now that I did it, but I had to actually patch up the plastic because it was like brittle, and it was like disintegrating in my fingers.
Hmm. Wow. Okay.
You're stressing me out. I have all these Atari games and everything that I haven't touched or played with in at least 5 years. So now I'm like, I wonder how many are rotten and what's going to happen to my Atari.
Well, that was actually kind of what I was looking at was, and I went online and I found like restoration kits for the controllers.
Yeah, I
Uh
need those. I need to do that. I now I know I'll bug you to help me
yeah,
figure that out.
one of the things that I ended up using, ironically, to repair the plastic, was where the plastic had come apart. I just backed it, or put some masking tape on the inside, and I used UV resin, UV cure resin, to fill in, to basically make fill-ins, and a little bit of epoxy sculpt. And you can't tell, unless you know where it disintegrated, or you were there when I did it. You absolutely cannot tell that the plastic's been repaired.
Now, what part of the plastic is the actual console?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Actually, the back of the console. If you look at the back of the console, uh, there's like this plastic, um like cover where your ports, your television port and audio ports and things are.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That gets real brittle after a while. At least it was on mine.
Okay.
Yeah, anything that I can salvage or repair myself, doing board level repairs, I'll repair myself. But if not, I'll throw a Raspberry Pi in it.
See, 'cause I have all my original Atari 2600 carts, but I didn't have the 2600 anymore. And I got one for Christmas. I did hook it up. It does work, but it's currently sitting in a box with all of my cards. And just for nostalgic reasons, but because if I want to play, I'll just plug in a flashback. But unfortunately, I don't think any of the flashbacks have the Raiders of the Lost Ark game, which is one of my favorites. But we're getting off the topic. Handhelds.
Well, yeah, or that's fine. I mean, this is an open talk, you know. I never got into like those like remake consoles. Those like Nintendo put out the minis.
Yep.
It seems silly to me to buy those, mostly because you had to search for ways to mod them because they didn't always come with games that you wanted on them.
Right. They were all preloaded.
Yeah, they were all preloaded, and a lot of it had to do with licensing, like what they could get away with putting on there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whereas, you know, you restore an original and get like I said, that Uno cart, you can get every ROM ever made for that system, even the retro ROMs that were made recently, and throw those on. In fact, there's on mine, I've got some different versions of Pac-Man, and the beauty of it is you're not pulling the cartridge in and out.
Everyone, this is Boris. Say hello.
Well, Boris is a big boy. You weren't kidding.
Oh yeah, he is. Oh, sorry about that.
Oh, it's all right.
But yeah, he's, by the way, that cat is like 32 pounds.
Jeez.
Yeah, he's huge, and he's more than just fluff. But I don't know. A couple years ago, we all went down to Florida, and my brother-in-law, ex-brother-in-law, brought. He had the Nintendo, the handheld, and the PlayStation. And I'm trying to remember it was the Nintendo we were using, because he hooked it up to the TV because we rented a house down there. And he handed me the controller and he loaded up Ninja Gaiden, which was one of my favorite games of all time for the NES. And I actually beat it without cheating. And I felt that the timing was off. It played too fast, if that made any sense. Visually it was the same, but the timing was off. And this was a legit Nintendo Mini, the handheld. He was able to get his hands on one. You would think that if Nintendo is going to release their own product, they would at least try to get the timing right,
Well, part of the problem with that was that actually, while it was licensed by Nintendo, and this is the other reason I don't like those, is because they're essentially emulators. If you're going to play an emulator, you might as well just get a Raspberry Pi and load all the games on it. At that point, for the same amount of money. I mean, you can go onto Amazon and get like the little mini Raspberry Pi cases, the NES Pi cases, and I can't tell you how many. I've probably done 15 or 20 of those for different people and just giving them out. With like Raspberry Pi 2s and 3s in them. In fact, I think I sent one to Retro Blasting, and I've got one that I've been working on forever. In fact, I sent 2 of them to Retro Blasting. I've got one I've had sitting here forever that I'm actually doing for Tom Burgess.
Okay.
And I think I saw, or I posted the NES Ninja Turtles one that I did for my cousin.
Yep. I saw that.
So, but yeah, I mean, for under $100 or under $200, you can actually make some pretty decent consoles, and they're better than the retro ones that they're putting out.
I know when I was at your place, we fired up one of them, right?
Yeah.
That was a NES console, though. It wasn't a handheld.
Right.
I don't remember. Could we do both on that one, or
that had it? That the NES had the NES, like when I do a console, I try to keep it like the games on it, like NES during its run, the original NES, they had the Game Boy and then the Game Boy Color
Hmm.
before they went to Super Nintendo. And so that's actually what's loaded on there is all NES, all original Game Boy, and then Game Boy Color. And then like the Super NES, I loaded Game Boy Color and I think up to Game Boy Advanced, which really I should have put that on the Nintendo 64.
Because you keep it to the era, whatever.
Right. I
Okay.
try to.
Right. Huh. So would you figure it cost what, about $100 to put one of these together?
Yeah, and well, it depends on what the cost of the actual console is.
Hmm.
Like what it costs to get a good console. I probably have close to 600 into the Ninja Turtles one. But that was like that one I went way overboard on because there are 4 custom controllers, one for each Ninja Turtle that went with that console.
Damn.
And then I gave my cousin like higher end HDMI cables, power. I gave him extra power supplies. Uh, I went and that the top of the console lights up. It's actually got like cutouts in it with the Ninja Turtle designs from the arcade game. It's actually got cells from the arcade game in it
Damn.
that are backlit. Yeah, that one I went way overboard. I gave him a couple extra controllers so he doesn't have to worry about wearing out his custom ones. And typically when I do one of those, I'll do or I order, and I think I've got one here close by.
Now, do you do the vintage controllers, or are they reproductions?
Some of them I will, if I've got original controllers, I'll make them USB. Oh, my cords are caught. But so yeah, I'll tear apart like an original controller, and I'll modify it so I can use it on USB. I'll attach a USB cable to it. I know I've got one around here. I've got a couple of them. And the company that I use was actually for most of the controllers. In fact, that I found that there was a company that actually makes a premium vintage style NES controller, and they also make a Super NES controller that you can actually swap 1-to-1 with an original shell, like an
Oh, wow.
original NES shell. So if you have a bad controller, you can swap it out and make a USB, swap out the internals. And they're made by a company, I think it was called retro gaming, or not retro gaming, but damn, the worst part is I know I had one of these in here.
It's all good. I mean,
Yeah, I wasn't expecting to do any or talk about any kind of consoles, but
I don't know. So, Russ, you said you had a Game Boy, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I remember when I first saw him advertised. What was it, 89? And I was like, oh wow, because I was
88, something like that. Yeah.
so into Super Mario Brothers, junior high. So I got one, and then I had it for probably about 3 years until one day, or 2 years. One day I'm like just playing, and you fall down the hole just one too many times. Like, and the screen cracked, and I'm like, oh, my Game Boy. But then my parents got me one for Christmas, like the following year, or right after that happened. And it was one of it's still the thick one, but it was clear so you could see all the
Mhm,
insides, and I still have
Yep.
that one. It still works perfectly. And then my niece also got one that was the original style, the original color that came out,
Now,
and
you-
she ended up giving that to me. So
now that I think about it, I take that back. I do have a vintage one. My buddy gave me one when I started collecting. He gave me, it's like a almost like a teal, a bluish color, but it's see-through. He gave me a vintage one with all the games he had for it. I totally forgot about that. It's sitting in my collection.
it's interesting.
I'll
Well,
have to
speaking,
unearth it and try it. But go ahead, Russ. Sorry.
I just happened to say, talking about handhelds, I just happened to think one of my other nieces had this. I've never even played it, but they're like, here, you can have this. What is this?
Is it a DS?
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm
Nice.
like, cool, thanks. I
That
think
thing's
it's only
actually
got one. Man.
that thing's actually neat because what is it? The bottom art, there's a touch screen,
Yeah.
and you can in some games actually utilize it. So
Cool. It has a Pokemon game in it.
there you go. Do you have the charger for it?
I have no idea. Probably not. But yeah, I just kind of, it's one of those things where I have 4 nieces and they get tired of their games or their old stuff. They're like, here, you can have this. I know I have a couple Game Boy Colors that they gave me. They don't play them anymore. I don't know. They're all stashed. Like I said, I haven't played any of them because I've never been a big handheld person. When I play video games, it's usually maybe hour here and there, unless I get into like playing Zelda and then I see if I can beat my time of beating the first quest on the original Nintendo in under 2 hours again. You know, that type of thing.
Yeah, handhelds like I think now if I remember correctly, we had gone down to Florida, I think it was. I was in high school, and my buddy had lent me his Game Boy for the plane, and the only cartridge he had was Tetris. So I was sitting there playing Tetris on the plane with my headphones in. But I did have a Game Boy, and I don't remember what I had a handful of. I don't remember what the hell happened to it now I think about it. Not yes, I do. It was stolen with the rest of my shit because I had put it in the garage with the rest of my toys.
Oh, ouch.
So
it's one of those things. I never, even with my Game Boy, I never had very many games for it. I think I had Dr. Mario, Tetris, obviously, because it came with it. Super Mario, was it Super Mario Land? Popular one at the time. Some little cheapy alien game that originally was an Atari game that they did a remake, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
Huh. I don't know. I might go back and I would love to get one of these vintage Merlin the Wizard games just to have one for my collection. I don't know if I'd ever play it, and I definitely want a Simon. I just don't have it yet.
Well, I'll probably be able to hook you and Art up both with Simon. Like I said, I have I actually have a couple Super Simons too. I have to dig them all out. I have them; they're everywhere.
Super Simon, was it like a harder? Did it have more buttons on it, or what was the difference?
I think it was mostly different shaped, and it has a little different selection of sequences. And if I remember right, it's easier for 2 players or playoff or something. I don't know. I'd have to look at it. I haven't played it much. I just found it. I'm lucky because where I work and where I pick up my mail at a post office box, I swing by the Goodwill. So I have like a Simon with the original box and a couple Super Simons with the original box that I pick up. And I test, and I'm not sure if the Super Simons, if the one seems to work, the other one seems to be glitchy. I don't know. Art could probably figure it out in 2 seconds, just a bad connection. Me, I'm just like, I ain't touching it. I saw what happened to my original Game Boy when I broke the screen. Disassemble, reassemble.
No, disassemble.
Stephanie, Stephanie, you screwed up your Game Boy.
All right.
I'm gonna laugh. Art, while he's bending over, picking up and looking for stuff with the green screen.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, what is that? It's like, oh, Art's still there.
Did so like I brought up mobile gaming. Do you think did mobile gaming kill handhelds, or
I think they were kind of on their way out anyway. I mean, it was cool, but they didn't do a whole lot. You know, that you like I was saying earlier, you couldn't really do a whole lot as far as there was no audio control. You know, you bought a console, you bought one of these game systems, and that was the only game it played.
right?
You couldn't swap games out. I think the way that things were going in the 80s, people were expecting more. You know, technology was getting better. I think they were going to get phased out no matter what. I mean, we would have gone on to something big and better, bigger and better anyway. Um,
Well,
Game Boy itself really wasn't that great. It was cool for the time, and I've got a lot of nostalgia for mine. But you know, Game Gear was way better. I mean, Game Gear was cool in the sense that it didn't have as many games as Nintendo, but it did have a couple of advantages. Like it had add-ons where there was actually like a TV tuner, and you could get kits for rechargeable batteries.
okay.
So there were, there were trade-offs with everything. And on top of that, Game Gear was one of the first color console or
Yep.
handhelds.
Yep.
So, things continued to get better. Looking back, it does seem like kind of an odd choice to have a handheld game system that you have the option to watch, free to air television on, broadcast television. But because that's something you don't see now.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you pick up a Switch, there's no TV tuner option for it that I've seen.
Right. Well, who gets TV over the air anymore? Anyhow, it's all cable now.
Well, cable or you stream it.
Right.
And again, and I may be wrong. I don't own a Switch. It's something I've looked into, but because I've got a couple friends that have them and they love them. I may get one down the road at some point, but does anybody know? Can you stream like Netflix to it or Hulu? Because that would seem like the logical kind of progression.
I think you can, because I might be wrong here. I don't own a Switch myself. I know they can be used as handhelds, and I believe you can connect them to Wi-Fi. I think I might be wrong on that, though. Maybe some of our listeners can clue us in, because it's as far as consoles go. As soon as I got my Xbox, I had PlayStations, but I got my Xbox and never looked back. I'm an Xbox guy. But as far as handhelds, and the Switch is like a weird amalgam between the two. It's a handheld and a console. But I don't know. I'm assuming you can connect, because everything's connectable to Wi-Fi. Hell, I've seen gas grills that have Wi-Fi on them.
Well, and that's again kind of the neat thing about these Game Boys with the Raspberry Pis in them is these Raspberry Pi Bs have Wi-Fi built in. Plus, there's a RJ45 jack on here, so you could wire Ethernet to it, and you can actually install Kodi on these.
Oh wow!
You can watch Netflix. You can watch, like your home network movies. You can watch Hulu. You can do a lot with one of these.
For what are they? $250, something like that.
I think this one was, yeah, but again, like I said, I got the most expensive I didn't do it because of the price, but I got kind of the most expensive Pi option that was available because I wanted the highest end one. I was going to have one of these custom built, I wanted it to have the max specs
Right.
that were available. So I got like the 4 gig Raspberry Pi in it, and then I did the 1 terabyte. In fact, I think I was actually talking to you on the phone one day while I was ordering the flash card for this. And the flash card alone, I think, was like $250.
Yeah,
I probably got about 500 in this.
because I remember that you were ordering. So you told me you were ordering a flash card because it had to be a certain speed, right?
Yeah. Well, in a size, it had to be at least 1 terabyte.
So, do you ever run across this stuff, Russ, when you're in like Goodwills and whatnot? Do you ever see any of this stuff in the wild?
Handhelds,
Yeah.
just very rare. I think what happens is that they more likely they get thrown away. Like I said, I find Simon's, I find big video, handheld electronic games that were from the late 70s, early 80s, more than I do those small handhelds, unless it's like these Happy Meal toy ones that randomly get shoved in a bag. But these things are so simple. Given if it was 1980, it'd be pretty sweet. Oh, I take that back. The ones that came out like 1980, 81 that were some miniature arcade cabinets.
Yeah.
Yep. I remember those.
And those things skyrocket. They're so valuable now. I found a Galaga one at the Goodwill for $10, and I knew right away it was definitely worth $10. And it turned out a lady that I know donated it because her son had scratched his name in the back of it. So I'm like, hey, if you have any more stuff like this, instead of donating it to Goodwill, let me take a look at it. But it's very rare to find anything that handhelds. There's a lot of video gamers in my town, so it might be that they get it first, or
they snag the stuff first.
I used to find quite a bit of Nintendo cartridges and Atari stuff like that, controllers, but handhelds I never have found a whole lot, unless it's some of the new stuff.
Right.
Because I even bought one that I thought was old that turned out was a reissue. But no biggie. I ended up giving it to a couple of kids. So,
hey,
one of the things that I've been looking at lately on eBay is I'm a huge, and I was as a kid, I was a huge Pac-Man fan.
Me too.
Like I love the cartoon, the cereal, even though it tasted like ass. Anytime I found it an arcade of Pac-Man or Pole Position was the other one. But Pac-Man, I had a big poster in my bedroom of Pac-Man. And one of the things that I've looked at recently or started looking for, and this is probably like my video game, one of my video game holy grail items is like the old Pac-Man like Tomitronic type standalone handheld.
Okay. Yep.
As a kid, I had no interest in it because it wasn't the arcade version.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't play like the arcade. And I didn't even like as a kid. I didn't, as much as I loved Pac-Man, I didn't like it on the 2600 because it stuck. Me as a kid, it didn't look right.
It was a terrible port. I mean,
and it was. Even the Miss Pac-Man and Pac-Man later on for like the 5200 was pretty bad too.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I'd like to get like the yellow Pac-Man handheld from the early 80s and then one of those mini consoles.
Okay. See, my we're not here yet, but my one of my well, actually,
oh yeah,
and I also have Space Invaders.
Are those actually functional?
No, these are gum.
Oh,
They're just tins, but they're kind of decorations for my desk. But
They're great for your action figures. They can play video games.
yeah, yeah. But one of my a vintage Pac-Man cabinet is one of my holy grails. I want a working cabinet. I saw one for sale about 2 years ago, and I still wanted to pull the trigger, but it was $4,500, and it had the side art was trashed, and I just I couldn't do it. Well, actually, I'll save the story for when we talk about consoles. You guys know I used to work for the county. I used to work for Wayne County, and we were cleaning out a building downtown because they were closing it down. And I had one of my jobs. I had to go through and look for any old, computer equipment and snag it. So I went in the basement, and there in the back is a vintage Miss Pac-Man, an entire cabinet up against the wall. Had I had a way to transport that thing, I would have grabbed it, but I didn't have a way to transport it. I didn't know anyone with a truck that could come down there, because I only had a couple hours before they were going to close it down, and I didn't have anyone that could come down there in time with a truck and snag it, because I would have had to figure out how to get it out of the basement.
Oh man, if only I lived closer, I could have helped you.
yeah.
Well, yeah.
You just said something. I know where there's a pickup truck I could have borrowed and a hand cart. In fact, I have a hand cart.
But I didn't even know if this thing was functional. It was
How to fix it.
It was sitting up. Well, that's going to be getting quite difficult, because the last company in the world that can fix those original CRT screens went out of business, and now from what I've read, the only places left that have the proper tools to do this are museums. They no longer make the tools to fix the vintage CRT monitor screens in the vintage cabinets now.
Look at Art's face. He's like, I can do it.
I
I can do
one
it.
way or another.
I will find it.
Parts. If you wanted it, I'd have made it happen.
Okay.
Even if I had to scavenge the parts off eBay, or we'd have got it fixed.
Well, here's something, because you're talking about these arcade in town. We have a guy. He's passed away. I knew him when I worked at a lumber yard. He would do the repairs on all the video games, jukeboxes, and all that stuff, video poker. In the back of his old shop, and I got to be in there. And sadly, his stepson just got arrested for a pretty hardcore felony. His wife has dementia. I'm not sure what all is there, but I might have a chance at getting some. They all need repair, but they're like late 70s, early 80s arcade cabinets.
Oh my God.
Pinball machines.
There's a place, as far as I know, they're still around. There's a place a couple miles from me. It's a company that's all they do is fix cabinets, arcade cabinets. And every once in a while they'll get one in, completely repair it, and they'll sell it. That's where I was looking for this Pac-Man cabinet. But I just, like I said, A, I didn't have the space, and B, I didn't have the cash. So I just didn't have, $4,500 laying around.
Yeah.
But
it's
eventually,
kind of I know I could have got a pole position that didn't work from these for less than, I think the guy said about $300, but at the time I'm like, where the hell am I going to put that thing?
Right.
And I don't know how far gone it was. That's one of the things, it's like it could be completely gutted for all I know. And so it's kind of like I don't know the stuff well enough to make a call, because I know it could be like anything with a toy. You can anything, if you know what's missing, you can have a toy worth a couple grand, but if it's missing two parts, it's worth $100.
Right. But no, art definitely. If I ever run across something, because even though we'll do an episode on cabinets, but there's three that I've always wanted. I wanted Pac-Man, I want a sit-down Spy Hunter, and I want a stand-up Stargate. Those are the three I've always wanted.
My Holy Grail 3 was always the Ninja Turtles arcade, the original one.
The 4-player?
Yeah, the
Mhm.
original 4-player that had it looked like they actually used like a real model for April O'Neil.
Mhm.
The original Pac-Man, I've always wanted a Miss Pac-Man too, like side by side. In fact, that place you and I went to, they sold when you were here the first time. They sold a bunch of their game systems.
You're kidding.
And there's a company here locally that does pinball machine repair, and they sell them. I can't remember where, but I think they also do stand up arcades,
Huh.
or arcade restoration. But anyway, yeah, Pac-Man, Miss Pac-Man, Mortal Kombat, and Ninja Turtles,
Okay.
and Pole Position are all ones that are like my whole on my Holy Grail list. But before I even think about doing that, I've got to finish off my Holy Grail list of guitars, which could happen here soon. I'm gonna be
Good.
going after the Buddy Holly guitar.
Nice.
Well, reproduction of it. The 1950 Fender Stratocaster Sunburst.
Nice. Nice.
Oh,
Yeah. I've always wanted the tabletop sit down Pac-Man.
Mm-hmm.
That's one that I would love to get. I remember playing one of those as a kid, not knowing what the hell I was doing. You know, just pulling on the joysticks and pushing buttons. You know, because one of the earliest.
you used to find those at Pizza Hut.
Yep.
Yeah, it was actually a pizza place that I would go. A local one, Home Place, had it. I also would want. I used to say I'd want the sit-down Star Wars. You know, was it Vector?
Yep. Vector graphics, sure.
But I'd want a stand-up one now because I realize I'm probably bigger than the freaking sit-down cabinet now. Be like, but and then, oh, what was that? Just yeah, those are the only two that I really stand out. Maybe a Frogger.
Okay. I played the hell out of Frogger on the Atari, but
Yeah, same here. That's one of the best Atari 2600 games that I have that I've played is just Frogger because it's playable and you.
all right. You all right? So anything else you want to go over on this, guys, or
I'm good.
where we at? Art?
I'm good if you guys are.
Cool. So thank you guys, and we will catch you on the next one.